I remember the moment my own daughter stood in my house and talked to me like I was a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. No warning, no hesitation, just a cold push out of a place I'd built with my bare hands. People think betrayal comes with shouting. Sometimes it walks in wearing your last name and tells you to step aside. If you've ever felt something like that, tell me your story in the comments. Chapter 1. Kendra stepped into the garage like she owned the place. I was tightening a stubborn hinge on an old storage cabinet toolbox still in my hands when she cleared her throat. "You don't need to come to Thanksgiving this year." The sentence landed without ceremony. No hesitation, no softening. Just a direct order dropped on a concrete floor. My grip slackened on the screwdriver. "What are you talking about?" She adjusted the strap of her bag, eyes darting past me as if she had someplace better to be. "Dad, you should rest. Let us handle the holiday." A simple line, but the way she delivered it told me she wasn't here to discuss anything. "Why wasn't this mentioned earlier?" The words left my mouth slower than my pulse was rising. Kendra shrugged. "It's fine. Everyone already set things up in your house. You don't have to stress." That part made my chest tighten. In my house. She didn't answer. Just tilted her chin toward the doorway leading to the living room, where a wave of chatter rolled through. Not soft talk, either. Loud, confident voices, the kind you hear from people who believe they're welcome. I followed her glance. Several of her friends were moving dishes around like it was their weekly routine. One man was stacking trays. Another woman rearranged chairs. The sense of permission in their actions told me Kendra had given them the green light, long before she stepped into the garage. Walking toward the living room, I kept my tone level. "Kendra, did you ask before bringing people here?" She sighed, already annoyed. "Dad, why do you always make things difficult?" A stranger carrying a bowl of stuffing brushed past me and muttered, "Careful there, Kendra needs that set aside." That single comment hit harder than I expected. This was no misunderstanding. This was entitlement walking freely through my home. Back in the garage, Kendra leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "We're trying to put together something nice. Don't turn it into drama." Something felt off. The rhythm of the space was different. A detail tugged at my attention. When I reached the front entry, my hand paused on the doorknob. The lock was new. Not the one I installed last spring, not the model I bought after a long shift. A different brand altogether. "Kendra!" I called out. "Why was this changed?" She wandered over at an unhurried pace. "Oh, my husband's family said the old one was easy to break. It was a safety thing. No one asked me." Her jaw tightened for a second. Then she let out a breath meant to sound impatient. "Dad, relax." Her tone tried to close the conversation before it began. Something in me pulled back, as if touching a live wire. I stepped out through the back door instead of answering. The cold air steadied my thoughts. A few leaves rustled across the deck boards, moving with a kind of direction I wished I had in that moment. Sat down on the edge of the steps, toolbox still by my side. The laughter drifting from the kitchen felt foreign, like it belonged to another household. Kendra's friends moved around with a confidence that didn't match the place or the history it carried. My home had become a stage for someone else's holiday, and I was no longer part of the script. A breath left my chest slower than usual. Something had already changed long before she walked into that garage. I just hadn't noticed the distance until it stood right in front of me, asking me not to come to my own Thanksgiving. I stayed there, letting the moment settle, not ready to walk back in or confront her again. The day had shifted in a way I couldn't undo, and the only thing left was to figure out what came next. Chapter 2. The next morning rolled in before I felt ready for it. A drive to the plant usually settled my mind, but the ride offered no relief this time. The route felt familiar enough, just not comforting. By the time I parked, a knot had already formed in my stomach. 2 technicians waved me over as I stepped through the entrance. "Big party at your place, huh?" One of them joked. "What did you do, Mercer hand the whole thing off to your kid this year?" There was no malice in their tone. Just the kind of teasing coworkers tossed around without thinking. Still something pressed into my ribs. "What are you talking about?" The question came out calmer than I expected. They grinned at each other. "Kendra was here yesterday. Said you told her to take over Thanksgiving. Said you needed a break." Another added, "Honestly good for you. Let the younger ones handle the chaos." A murmur stretched through the hallway as a few others nodded in agreement. "He earned it," someone said behind me. "Guy's been running the show for years." Their comments continued for a bit, but the words faded into background noise. My daughter had painted a version of me that didn't match reality. She'd framed it like a gesture of kindness on my part, as if I'd stepped aside willingly. I walked to my station and tried to focus on the control panel, yet every switch and gauge pulled me back to the same thought she'd done more than reorganize a holiday. She'd shifted the balance between us without my consent. Around noon, a supervisor passed by and chuckled. "Mercer, I heard you're taking it easy this year." Smart man. There wasn't much to say to that, so I nodded and returned to my work. The shift dragged on. Each break room comment added another layer to the unease. It wasn't anger, exactly, more a slow realization that my own story was being rewritten while I was still living it. When the day finally ended, the walk to my truck felt heavier than usual. I didn't want to go home but had no idea where else to be. The grocery store on the corner drew me in partly out of habit. A quick stop for a few items might help clear my head. The bell over the door jingled when I stepped in. That place hadn't changed much in a decade, which usually helped. I grabbed a loaf of bread and a carton of milk, then turned toward the register only to see Marisol already there. She spotted me instantly. "Grant, you look worn out. Everything all right?" Something like that I answered, placing the groceries on the counter. "Long day." Her eyes narrowed in that way only people who've worked around crisis know how to do. "You planning to talk about it?" "Not sure there's much to say." It wasn't entirely true, and she seemed to sense it. She leaned in slightly. "Kendra told folks she changed your lock." That accurate. The question stopped me cold. "Where'd you hear that?" "My niece is friends with her. Word travels." Marisol lowered her voice. "You should check everything again. People don't swap locks unless they're shifting boundaries." A sentence like that hit harder coming from a woman who spent her life seeing the worst outcomes of family conflict. She didn't dramatize things. She called them as she saw them. "I'll look into it," I managed. Her expression softened, but not out of pity, more out of concern for someone walking into danger without seeing it. Do that sooner rather than later. Back in my truck, those words repeated themselves. Boundaries shifting. Not a phrase I wanted to think about, but too fitting to ignore. The drive home approached slower than usual. Rounding the final corner, my headlights caught a line of cars along my driveway. Too many. Every spot was taken right up to the mailbox. I pulled onto the curb and sat there for a moment. People moved around through the front windows, carrying bags, adjusting furniture, talking among themselves, as though preparing for a catered event. None of their faces were familiar. A man stepped out from the porch and waved at me. "Hey sir, could you circle back later? We're setting up the dining area." My hands tightened around the wheel. "This is my house." He blinked, taken aback. "Oh, Kendra said we could get things ready." There was no confrontation, no apology, just confusion, as if he didn't know whose property he was standing on. He walked back through the door before I could say more. Backing the truck up, I parked a block away. The cold air hit me hard when I stepped out, but it kept my thoughts sharp. People kept passing through the doorway like it was a train station rather than a private home. Standing there on the sidewalk, I watched strangers walk in and out, arms full of holiday supplies, laughing as if they'd been given permission to treat the place as their own. No one looked for me. No one wondered where I was. A sense of displacement stretched through my chest, the kind you feel when the ground shifts under you, and nothing stays where it should. Home had always been the one place I didn't question. Yet now the message was written in every unfamiliar face, crossing my porch step aside. The idea of entering that house felt wrong, at least for that moment. I turned the key again and eased the truck down the street, letting the engine take me someplace quieter. The roads blurred into each other while I drove without a real destination in mind. Eventually, the city thinned out. A small public parking area near the lake came into view, a place I hadn't visited in months. I pulled in and killed the engine. The sudden stillness settled around me, not soothing, just present. Sat back, letting the weight of the day land where it wanted. The water stretched out ahead, barely moving, giving me room to think about the parts of my life I thought were steady. The question circling in my head wasn't dramatic or philosophical. It was simple: how far had this gone already? And how far would she push next? I stayed there with that thought, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel, letting the evening settle around me without any answer. Chapter 3. The lake sat still while I tried to make sense of everything. Before any thought settled, my phone buzzed. The message came from Mrs. Halverson, the neighbor who'd lived next door since Kendra was still in grade school. "Why are people walking straight into your bedroom?" Attached was a photo. A man I didn't recognize was twisting the knob of my room, leaning in, as though he'd been told it was storage space. Something sharp moved through my chest. That room held the last pieces of my life with my wife. No one besides me had walked through that doorway in years. Another text appeared. "They said your daughter told them it was fine." My thumb hovered over the screen longer than it should have. For a moment, doubt nudged its way in. Maybe I misread everything. Maybe Kendra had a harmless reason. Maybe I was being too rigid. Those thoughts barely formed before another vibration hit. "Kendra. Dad, don't blow this up. He was just looking for a place to set down serving trays." I typed slowly. He was in my room. Her reply came fast. "It's not a big deal. You're making something out of nothing." A familiar phrase from her childhood, one she used whenever she wanted to avoid owning her behavior. My jaw tightened. Rather than argue, the screen was locked and set face down beside me. The drive back toward the neighborhood brought a restless feeling. Instead of heading straight home, I rolled past the house once, watching cars packed tightly along the street. Not one space left for me. The porch light was on, and people darted through the doorway with bags of food decorations and trays. Every movement screamed authority and comfort, as if they considered the place theirs by default. Something else bothered me. A thought had been forming since the night before, but needed confirmation. Pulling into a small gas station lot, I stepped out and walked over to the keypad by the front door of my house. Entered the old passcode. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. The keypad blinked red, then locked me out temporarily. My own access code had been disabled without a word. A tight breath left my lungs. The question rose again: was I overreacting, or was something deeply wrong here? Years spent raising a child alone after losing a spouse had taught me how to blame myself first. The part of me that still tried to protect Kendra wondered if I was missing context, if there was some explanation I hadn't heard yet. But then another part, the one that had learned about boundaries the hard way, whispered something closer to the truth. People don't remove a lock code by accident. Instead of circling the same thoughts, I turned the truck toward downtown Madison. Caleb Wright worked at the bank near the square. A steady voice, the kind who didn't sugarcoat anything. When I arrived, his office door was open. "Grant," he said, waving me in. "What brings you here?" "Wanted to review some older documents," I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "The property files." He studied my face for a second, then nodded. "All right. What's going on?" "A few things at home," I said. "Kendra's hosting Thanksgiving. She changed the lock. People are using the house like it's theirs." Caleb sat back. "Changed the lock? Without asking you?" "Yes, that's not small." He opened a file drawer. "Let's take a look." While he searched, he asked more questions. When it started, who was involved, whether any paperwork had been signed recently. Each answer seemed to widen the crease between his eyebrows. Finally, he slid a folder across the desk. "This is the latest record," he said. "Ownership is listed under one name. Yours. No co-signers. No transfers. No shared claims." He tapped the page. "You're the sole legal owner. A sense of relief didn't come. Instead, something steadier took shape clarity. Kendra hadn't just blurred lines. She'd crossed them. Caleb leaned forward. Whatever's happening back there, keep documentation. Every message, every change, every attempt to access anything of yours. These things can escalate if you're not careful. His words landed without friction. I knew he was right. People don't drift into manipulation. They slide into it step by step, convinced they're entitled to more than they've earned. Images from the last few days flickered through my mind. Strangers in my kitchen. The lock. The message from my neighbor. Kendra's defensiveness. Her story at work. All of it forming one long thread. Before standing up, I asked Caleb to email me a digital copy of the house deed. He sent it within minutes. Back in the truck, a decision took root. Started saving screenshots of every message. Recorded a short voice memo describing the lock code issue. Took a picture of the keypad. None of it was dramatic, just preparation. A way to protect myself in case things took another turn. Dusk stretched across the sky by the time I reached my street. Cars still lined the driveway. More headlights appeared behind me, turning in as though I wasn't even part of this address anymore. Walking toward the porch, I tried the door one more time. The keypad flashed red again. Footsteps approached from inside. A woman I'd never met opened the door halfway and blocked the entrance with her arm. "Sorry," she said not unkindly. "This area's for the women to set things up. Could you wait outside for a bit?" "This is my home," I replied. She hesitated for a breath. "Kendra told us she needed space to prep. It'll just be a moment." Her attempt at politeness didn't soften anything. People moved behind her like a small army preparing an event they didn't fund, plan, or own. Something twisted low in my chest, not explosive, just steady and heavy. I stepped back. She closed the door gently, as though she believed I'd understand. The porch light glowed overhead. The faint noise of people shuffling around carried through the walls. A place that once held memories of family dinners now held strangers acting like hosts. My hand rested on the rail for a second. The urge to walk in, raise my voice, demand an explanation, none of it rose the way it might have years ago. Age had pressed patience into me, but it had also sharpened the sense of when something had gone too far. Without a word, I turned away from the door, took a slow breath, and stayed there on the top step, not sure whether to go back to the truck or stay long enough to attempt another try. For the first time in a long while, I didn't know where I fit in my own life. Chapter 4. The phone rang before the sun had fully come up. Kendra didn't bother with a greeting. "Dad, you need to stop interfering." The edge in her tone cut straight through whatever rest I'd gotten. "What exactly am I interfering with? You're making everything harder. People are trying to prepare and you're throwing off the whole plan." A rustle came through the line, then a man's voice, low and impatient. Just tell him it's ours to handle." Kendra hesitated for half a beat, then repeated it as if it were her own thought. "Thanksgiving is going to be run by my husband's family this year. They need freedom to use the space. So they're in control now. The question wasn't raised or heated, just direct. You're turning this into something it's not." Her breath snagged. "Every time I try to help you make me feel guilty? Did you change the lock without asking?" "I knew you'd react like this," she shot back. "That's why I didn't say anything. You pressure me all the time." There it was again, the sudden pivot from action to accusation. A tactic she'd learned when she was young, shift the weight back onto me so she didn't have to face her choices. "Kendra," I said, slowly removing my access to my own home isn't a misunderstanding. She sniffed sharply. "You don't understand how much stress I'm under. Everyone keeps asking me questions. I'm doing all this work and you're making me the bad guy." Before I answered, another chime sounded on my phone. A new message slid across the top of the screen. "Caleb. Grant, call me as soon as possible. A request to transfer control of the utility account came through, submitted from your daughter's device." The words landed with a dull thud. Not panic, not even shock. Just confirmation of something I'd been resisting. Kendra kept talking, her voice rising and falling in practiced emotional waves. I feel like you don't trust me anymore. I feel like no matter what I do, you judge me. Did you send a request to change the utility account? I interrupted. She paused long enough to reveal the truth in the silence. I was trying to help. You've handled everything for years. I thought maybe, that's not help. Her breath hitched again, this time rehearsed. You're twisting everything I do. You always have. You make me feel like I'm failing. The guilt card, the oldest one in her deck. I'll call you back, I said, and ended the call before she gathered momentum. Driving to the bank felt less like making a choice, and more like following gravity. By the time I stepped into Caleb's office, he already had the file pulled up. You saw my message, he asked. Yes, it was a full access request, he explained. If it had gone through, she would have gained authority to change billing coverage, even disconnect services. My jaw tightened. She submitted that. Came from her login and her IP address. He rotated the monitor so I could see. We stopped it before it processed. The screen showed the timestamp, the device number, the request type. Nothing to interpret or guess at. Caleb eyed me for a moment. This kind of thing usually doesn't happen all at once. When someone starts altering accounts without permission, the pattern tends to continue. I swallowed down a bitter taste. What do I need to do? Block any changes that aren't done in person by you, he said. We can add verification layers. Also, keep records. Everything. He printed out a document confirming that the account remained unchanged and that I was still the sole authorized manager. The printer hummed slow and steady, almost too calm for the weight of the moment. You okay? He asked. I'm not sure that's the right question anymore. He nodded without pressing. People in his line of work know when not to pry. When the papers finished, he handed them to me, clipped neatly together. Don't let this slide, he said. People test boundaries. They don't stop until someone stops them. The words sat between us. Practical, unsugared, true. Walking out of the bank, the air felt sharper than earlier. I crossed the lot toward my truck, the papers warm from the printer held against my palm. Every step toward the vehicle replayed the last few days in fragments. The stranger setting up trays, the new lock code refusing to accept my entry, the photo of a man opening my bedroom door, the calls from colleagues who thought I'd stepped aside voluntarily. Kendra's tears triggered right when accountability arrived. One pattern, one direction. A gust moved through the lot, pushing a loose receipt across the pavement. It skittered past my boot, turning as it went, until it landed face down under another car. Something about the small movement pulled me back to the present. This wasn't about a holiday anymore. It wasn't about misunderstandings or miscommunication. It wasn't even about respect, not really. Control. That was the word taking shape in my mind. Reach for the door handle. Pause. Look down at the papers again. My name printed alone in the owner field. The only steady fact in a week that had slipped further and further out of alignment. If I kept moving the way I had been, silent, patient, hoping things would correct themselves, there'd be nothing left to protect. Not the house, not my place in it, not the boundary between responsibility and exploitation. Sat behind the wheel, letting the engine turn over. The day had stretched longer than usual, and for a moment I stayed still, hands resting lightly on the stack of documents Caleb had given me. The thought settled without drama or noise. Something had already crossed a line, and pretending otherwise would only widen the opening. I stared ahead at the exit of the lot, the road pulling forward into whatever would come next. The papers still warm in my grip. Chapter 5. The day after the utility scare started earlier than I expected. The phone rattled on the nightstand, and a voice I hadn't heard in months came through when I picked it up. Grant, it's Helen from across the street. You need to check your office before it's too late. Her whisper carried a kind of urgency she never used, not even when her husband had fallen on their porch last winter. What happened? Someone was in there yesterday. They weren't looking for a place to put food. That girl of yours said it was fine, but I've lived long enough to know when something isn't right. The call ended before I could ask anything else. She'd always been direct. That tone, though almost protective, lingered with me as I dressed. Walking through the house again in my mind, I remembered a small moment from a few months back. Kendra had asked to see our old insurance folder. She'd been insistent, saying she wanted to understand the paperwork. I let her read it in the kitchen while I cooked dinner, but didn't allow her to take it with her when she left. Something in her eagerness had felt off. That memory snapped into place now. Strangers stepping into my room wasn't about setting down trays. They weren't organizing decorations. They were browsing, searching, assessing what belonged to me. Instead of going home, I drove straight to the hospital where Marisol worked. She was finishing a break when I found her near the vending machines. Her eyes lifted the moment she saw my face. "You look like someone moving through fog," she said. "Things have escalated," I told her. "People in my house, the lock changed, and now the utilities." She motioned for me to sit. Nobody in her line of work wasted words. "You're being boxed out," she said plainly, step by step. First the social narrative, then the access, then the financial angle. It's a pattern. Feels deliberate. It is deliberate. "You're being pushed to the margins of your own life," she continued. "People do this by twisting the story until you look irrational for defending yourself. Then they isolate you from your own belongings." Her bluntness wasn't harsh, it was grounding. "What do you think I should do?" "Protect what's yours. And don't argue with someone determined to rewrite the truth. Act. Don't explain. You're not dealing with misunderstanding anymore." The clarity in her words settled where panic had been building. "Thanks," I said quietly. "Anytime. Don't walk blind into something that's already planned out." The drive to the bank was steady. My hands didn't shake. Nerves had turned into something sharper, like the moment before stepping into cold water. Caleb greeted me with a nod and ushered me into his office. "You saw my earlier message?" "Yes." He opened a folder he had already prepared. If she tried to change the utility accounts, the next typical step is co-ownership requests, sometimes even power of attorney attempts. I've seen this play out with parents who trust their adult children too much. A dull heaviness settled across my shoulders as he spoke. "Are you saying she's trying to take the house?" "I'm saying she's moving in that direction whether she admits it or not." He slid another document my way. "This protects your financial rights. It makes unauthorized actions harder to push through. You should consider it." A part of me wanted to deny everything outright, but denial didn't change what I'd already seen: strangers in my bedroom, the new lock, the utility request, the guilt tactics, the lies she fed my coworkers. Caleb continued. "There's more. She's telling people you're forgetful, that you're overwhelmed, that you insisted on stepping back this year. She said that word gets around. Something in my chest deflated, not from heartbreak, but from recognition. This wasn't clumsiness, it was strategy. Her husband's family had influence. Combining that with the image of a struggling, aging parent, people would believe it. People always believe the story that makes them feel useful. Caleb tapped the papers in front of me. "So here's the choice. Keep accommodating, and hope she stops, or reinforce your boundaries with action." Leaning back in the chair, I rubbed a hand over my face. Harmony had always mattered to me, maybe too much. Raising a child alone had required compromise, patience, and a willingness to absorb more than my fair share. It became second nature to bend for the sake of keeping the peace. But sacrifices turn into expectations when no one draws the line, and expectations turn into entitlement when silence lasts too long. "I'm done waiting for this to fix itself," I finally said. Caleb nodded once as if he'd been expecting that answer. He walked me through the paperwork, protective holds, verification layers, alerts, restrictions, and none of it felt dramatic. It felt overdue. Everything was documented, validated, and scheduled. When we finished, he printed a slip with my next appointment for formal asset protection. "You're doing the responsible thing," he said as he handed it over. The air in the lobby felt warmer than outside when I stepped through the glass doors. People milled around deposit slips, account questions, Small conversations that didn't touch anything heavy. Daily life moved without noticing the battles some of us fought privately. I checked the paper Caleb had given me, the date, the time, the confirmation code. Something in the simplicity of that small rectangle steadied me. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even empowerment. It was direction. No fireworks, no bold declaration in my mind. Just the knowledge that passivity had carried me as far as it could. The breeze pushed against my jacket when I reached the parking lot. I paused beside the truck, the paper still between my fingers, the next steps already forming in my thoughts. Not a dramatic moment. Not a final one. Just another step toward reclaiming what had slipped from my hands, little by little, without permission. Chapter 6. The next morning began with a task I should have started earlier. Every scrap of information, every message, photo, and recording needed to be collected. The folder on my laptop grew quickly. Images of the new lock. Screenshots of the disabled code. The text thread where Kendra insisted I was overreacting. The voicemail where she cried halfway through blaming me. And the photo Mrs. Halverson sent a stranger easing open my bedroom door as if he belonged there. Short audio clips were added next. Short clipped exchanges where she twisted the story until I sounded unreasonable. Not dramatic, just enough to show a pattern. Anyone listening would hear the same shift I had felt. Caleb called when I finished. "Bring everything he said. Let's secure your accounts properly." Driving to the bank felt steadier than I expected. The fear that had been humming for days was clearing out, replaced by something methodical. The kind of focus that comes when you stop hoping someone will change and start preparing for what they're already doing. Caleb spread the documents across his desk, sorting through each item. "This is more than boundary issues," he said. "She's positioning herself to control the property. How far can she get? If you hadn't intervened with the utilities, the next step would have been a shared ownership request. After that, even power of attorney wouldn't be a stretch." He wasn't trying to frighten me. He never raised his voice. The man just dealt in facts. "What do you recommend?" "Single direction access," he replied. "Only your credentials can make changes. No online edits from any other party. Anyone trying to alter a detail would have to come in person with you present." He pulled out another form. "This prevents any digital modifications to mortgage utilities, insurance, or tax records. It puts a barrier where right now there's an open door." I signed each line he pointed to. His pen moved efficiently across the page, checking boxes, adding codes. Halfway through, he looked up. "You're doing exactly what you should. Protect yourself now and you save yourself months of repair later." Before heading home, I stopped by the hospital. Marisol had a break around noon, and she met me in the staff lounge, still wearing her badge and a tired smudge under her eyes. "Did you handle the accounts?" she asked. "Yes." "Good. Now check the security cameras." She pulled up the app on her phone. I hadn't reviewed the footage for over a week, never had a reason to before now. She tapped through the timestamps until she reached the afternoon Mrs. Halverson mentioned. "Here." The screen showed Kendra walking through my front hallway with 3 people trailing behind her. They moved directly into my office. The door swung open, and they began rifling through drawers with a sense of purpose that made my stomach clench. Voices drifted out in muffled bits. "You said it was here. Check the back. Old documents. Something about insurance." A cold realization settled. This wasn't about a holiday. They weren't tidying or decorating. They were searching. Marisol handed back the phone. "They're not being careless. They're being bold." Her calm tone grounded me again. Not angry, not overwhelmed, simply aware. Leaving the hospital, I reached for the truck door when the phone buzzed once more. A number I didn't recognize sent a text. "Don't make this harder. We can work it out. Please stop pushing things." Signed Alicia, Kendra's sister-in-law. She'd always been polite during gatherings, though distant. The text didn't sound like her. Something strained sat beneath the words. Before I answered, another message followed. "I'm not saying you're wrong, just please don't make problems for everyone." A small pause in the typing indicator. Then one last line, I can't say more. Someone standing here. That told me everything I needed. She wasn't defending them. She was scared. The next hit came an hour later. An alert from my bank, unrecognized login attempt. IP flagged. A long breath forced its way out as I dialed Caleb. There was an attempt, I said. I'm locking all transaction permissions right now, he replied. No one besides you will be able to move a cent, even with correct credentials. What about other accounts? We'll secure those too. Bring your documents back in. We'll finalize everything. The steps repeated signing, reviewing, confirming. No emotion, no rage, just a checklist. Rational. Necessary. After finishing the forms, Caleb organized my files into a binder he kept on a side counter. This is your record, he said. If anything escalates, you have every piece of evidence you need. His confidence steadied something in me. There was no shame in protecting your home, no weakness in refusing to be taken advantage of. People can tell themselves any story they want about why they deserve control. But documentation doesn't care about stories. He closed the binder and handed it back. You're ready for whatever comes next. Leaving his office, I walked down the hall with the folder tucked under my arm. The day's decisions had stacked themselves neatly, one step, then the next. No dramatic speeches, no confrontations, just planning, preparation. Boundaries finally being drawn after too long. My pace slowed near the exit, not from uncertainty, but from the weight of everything aligning at once. Each choice carved out a little more clarity, a little less fog. By the time I reached the lobby doors, the binder felt heavier, but in a way that grounded me rather than pulled me down. I pushed my hand against the bar and stepped through, already thinking about the next move. Chapter 7. 2 days before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. Kendra had posted a long message written like an announcement. Thanksgiving will be held at Dad's house this year. Everyone come early so we can prepare the space. Bring what you need. No question. No invitation. Just a declaration. Several relatives reacted with thumbs-up emojis and comments about how helpful Kendra was for taking over. Not one person asked if I agreed. The thread kept lighting up until I muted it. The binder from Caleb sat on the passenger seat as I drove to work. There was no anger, just a tight steadiness building in my chest. By mid-afternoon, a different kind of alert arrived in my mailbox at home, a letter from the power company. The envelope carried a formal tone that always makes the stomach sink before you even read the content. Your service account has received a request to transfer ownership, pending verification. The words stiffened my posture. I read the line again slower, as if it would change. It didn't. A request to transfer ownership. I didn't call. I drove straight to their office. The customer service rep, a young man named Nolan, pulled up my file. His eyebrows shot up as soon as he saw the request. That's odd, he said. This type of transfer usually comes from the account owner directly. It didn't, I replied. I didn't authorize anything. He scrolled a little further, tapped a button, then tilted the monitor slightly. Submitted from a mobile device under the name Kendra Mercer. Same last name as yours. Does that ring a bell? My jaw tightened. She's my daughter. She does not have legal authority. Nolan nodded, adjusting his tone. Then we'll halt this immediately, and I'll flag the account for in-person verification only. No digital changes unless you're physically here. He printed a form confirming the reversal. The page felt warm in my hand, as if it had been pressed straight from the tension of the moment. I had barely stepped out of the office when my phone rang. Kendra. Dad? Why did you cancel what I did? Her voice trembled with manufactured hurt. I was trying to make things easier for you. That was a transfer request, I said, not a helping hand. Her breath hitched just enough to signal the shift. You always think the worst of me. I can't do anything right with you. A murmur came from her end male, impatient, urging her to continue. Just finish it, he whispered. Kendra raised her voice slightly. They're helping me manage things. You act like I'm stealing from you. I lowered mine. You made a legal request on my property without permission. She sniffed loudly. I'm just trying to support you. You make me feel like a criminal." The call cut off when she realized I wasn't stepping into the trap. Not 10 minutes later, another call came, in my sister, then a cousin, then an uncle. All repeating versions of the same accusation. "Kendra says you're giving her a hard time. You're being stubborn. Why can't you let the kids help?" One relative went further. She said you won't let her take responsibility because you think she's incompetent. Each word chipped at my patience, not because of the criticism, but because of the speed with which her narrative spread. She moved fast and hit soft targets, people who loved her enough to believe anything she cried about. I didn't defend myself. Let them talk. Explaining only deepened the hole. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Marisol. A screenshot. A text thread between Kendra and someone listed only as J. "Kendra, we need to get the papers done before Thanksgiving. If he's home, distract him. J. He won't stop you, Kendra. He won't know until it's over." The timestamp was from 3 days ago. Something in me cooled instantly. Not numbness, not rage, just clarity. People reveal themselves when they think no one is watching. Any doubt that had survived the last week evaporated. Driving home, I didn't even wait to get inside. I pulled over, opened my laptop, and attached every piece of evidence, photos, texts, recordings, into one file. Then I printed the messages from Marisol and added them to the stack. Each page slid into the binder slowly, not out of ceremony but caution. The truth was, they're tangible and undeniable. It wasn't about a holiday, not about generational misunderstandings, not about a stressed daughter making mistakes. It was deliberate, it was organized, and it was aimed at me. The next morning, I picked up additional forms from Caleb ownership confirmations, access restrictions, and a notarized affidavit stating I was the sole legal proprietor of the house. He gave me a quiet nod as I packed them into the folder. "You're ready for whatever you're walking into," he said. "This isn't the confrontation I wanted. It's the one that was built for you," he replied. "Just bring the truth with you. Let the facts talk." By the time Thanksgiving morning arrived, the street was already lined with cars. People streamed toward my house carrying dishes, folding tables, bags of groceries, invited guests for an event held on property they believed belonged to them for the day. I stepped out of the truck, binder in hand. No rush, no tremor, no heat under my skin. Just movement forward. The walkway felt narrower than usual as I approached the front steps. Someone swung the door open, laughing with a plate in their hands, then froze when they saw me standing there. I didn't say a word. My fingers tightened around the folder, and I took one more step toward the threshold. Chapter 8. The moment I crossed the threshold, the noise dimmed. People stood around my dining room, rearranging serving trays, adjusting tablecloths, carrying dishes as if they had every right to be there. A few turned when they noticed me, confusion spreading across their faces. None of them expected me to walk through my own door. Kendra froze first. She stood by the end of the table, a folder of printed recipes in her hands. Her smile faltered the second she saw the binder under my arm. "Dad, I thought you were—" I didn't answer. Just walked forward steady until I reached the center of the room. The sound of utensils clinking stopped. No yelling, no crowding. Only a gradual, uneasy silence, spreading through a room full of people who suddenly realized something was wrong. "Everyone stop what you're doing," I said. Not loud, not angry, just enough force to cut through the chatter. Hands paused, chairs stilled. Even the ones who didn't know me sensed the shift. Kendra stepped closer. "Dad, you're making this uncomfortable. We're trying to—" I set the binder on the table and opened it to the first page. "This is the deed to this house," I said. "Sole ownership. No co-signers, no transfers." A murmur passed through a few relatives of her husband. Kendra blinked rapidly, her throat tightening. I turned the page. "This is the attempted utility transfer request. It came from your device. The company confirmed it." Her shoulders jerked. "That's not what—" Another page. "This is the alert from the bank about someone trying to access my account. Same day you were here." Someone behind her exhaled sharply. Next page. "Security footage of 3 people going through my desk drawers. including the file you asked me about months ago." A ripple went through the room. One woman stepped back, bumping into a folding chair. Alicia stood near the wall, hands clasped. Her gaze dropped the moment mine met hers. And the last page. A printout of the message thread Marisol sent me. "Here's the conversation about getting the papers done before Thanksgiving." Kendra's face drained of color. The man beside her, her husband, shifted his weight and moved a few steps back. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "You don't understand what I'm going through. I'm trying to help you and you're making me out to be." "No," I said softly. "I'm showing what happened." Her eyes filled with frustrated tears. The old tactic surfaced again, the same one used when she was a child and didn't want consequences. "You never trust me," she said, voice cracking. "You twist everything. You make me feel like nothing I do is good enough." Not one person stepped in. Not one voice supported her. The room wasn't angry or sympathetic, it was simply stunned. The truth laid out plainly tends to do that. I closed the binder. "Everyone needs to leave my house," I said. "Now!" A few people hesitated, looking at Kendra for guidance. But she had nothing left to give them. Not explanations, not instructions. Her husband placed a hand on her shoulder and urged her towards the door. Alicia lingered only long enough to whisper, "I'm sorry," before following the others. They filed out, slowly gathering dishes, folding tables, keeping their eyes low. No one looked at me directly. No one argued. The weight of exposure had silenced every excuse before it formed. Kendra paused at the doorway, still trying to summon tears. "Dad, can we just talk about this?" "You're misreading." "You need to leave," I said. My voice didn't shake. She swallowed hard, realizing there was nothing else to reach for. She stepped outside without another word. When the door finally shut, the house felt still for the first time in weeks. No voices, no footsteps, no strangers drifting through rooms they had no right to touch. Only the fading warmth of a space I once protected too gently. I gathered the binder, the scattered papers, the folded tablecloth someone left behind. No anger rushed in. No grief either. Just a long exhale, one that felt like reclaiming something I should have defended sooner. The sale of the house went through 2 weeks later. The decision wasn't impulsive. It wasn't born out of resentment. It was simply the next step in reshaping a life that had been pulled in the wrong direction for too long. The new place sat near Lake Mendota, smaller and easier to manage. A single-story unit with a modest porch and enough room for what I valued. When I signed the closing documents, there was no dramatic moment, just a quiet acknowledgement that not all losses need to be mourned. Kendra learned about the sale through the forwarding address notice, and a short message I sent, "I've moved. I'm safe. I need space. No accusations, no lectures, no invitations." Her response trickled in hours later, long paragraphs, apologies mixed with blame, excuses paired with pleas. I read them, then set the phone down without replying. Distance doesn't always mean anger. Sometimes it's self-respect. Her husband's family pulled away from her afterward. Rumors drifted back, criticism about the stunt she tried, disbelief that she risked an illegal move, tension building between her and nearly everyone involved. None of that brought satisfaction. It simply brought balance. Life returned to its steady rhythm. My work at the water treatment plant continued. Weekends filled themselves with long walks by the lake trail, the kind where your mind sorts itself out without trying. Eventually, I signed up for a volunteer program at a community center, something I'd meant to do for years. It felt good to build something that wasn't tied to obligation. One evening after a training session, I returned to the new place. The porch light glowed faintly. My key turned smoothly in the lock, the way a lock should when it belongs to you alone. I stepped in, set down my bag, and closed the door behind me.